So I don't know how I'm gonna do with this. I'm trying a new technique with my camera, and seeing how it does. Anyway, so I am trying to answer questions that I think the average person might ask me, and so one of the questions that was recently suggested was, "What is fiber arts?" Some people may know what knitting or crocheting is, and a lot of people refer to those as crafts. And like, the good old craft fairs back in the day when I was a kid, were very different from what they've become in the last 20 or so years. Uh, so looking back, um, I would have never heard the word fiber art when I was a kid. And I was an average person. I knew what knitting and crocheting was. I probably had found out what weaving was at some point. If you grew up with around fairy tales, you knew about spinning in some concept, that you spun things on a spinning wheel, but didn't necessarily think beyond the references in the fairy tales between Rumpelstiltskin and Sleeping Beauty and those types of things. So, what are fiber arts? Is an interesting question, and I thought I'd give a shot of answering that here. So, basically, I consider knitting and crocheting also fiber arts, not crafts, not limiting them to just I don't want to say just crafts, because craftsmanship is a well-deserved term. That if something is done well, it's done with good craftsmanship, and that matters. And so I don't want to downgrade the idea of craft, but when you say arts and crafts, a lot of times people think of kids' arts and crafts with, water soluble paint and non toxic markers and construction paper and stick glue and, so I want to get away from the term craft, but talk about when you think of what is an art and what is fiber arts. So fiber arts is basically anything to do with fiber. And I'm not talking about the fiber that we eat to keep our digestion healthy. I'm talking about animal hair and fur and fibrous materials that you can get out of plants, and you can process things into fiber. So you can they've been able to get fiber out of corn, not the silk. We're not talking about the stalk or the silk as they exist in the field. We're talking about that they process the corn, and part of the byproducts that they can make through processing corn into a bunch of different things is they can actually make a fiber out of the protein out of corn. So it's really interesting. They can do that also with milk. They can do that with soy. They can do that with a couple other things. My brain is just blanking. Anyway, I digress, because that's not really what we're talking about in terms of fiber arts. But fiber arts is anything to do with these fibrous materials and the products you can make with them. So fiber arts includes any type of felting. And we're not talking, again, sometimes when a person hears the word felt, they think of when you would go to the local chain craft store, whatever that was for you, whether it was, stores of the past like Ben Franklin, or some other chain store of the past where you would go and you'd get your, 11 by 8 sheet of felt or larger, because they did sell them in rolls on bolts like fabric. And so you would think of this synthetic glued felt that was a different process. If you go further back, that's when you get into more of the real felt that would have been available pre-synthetic stuff. So if you go back like 100 years and you go to buy felt, you were buying true woolen felt that was made from sheep's wool or other animal fibers that were then usually wet processed to bind together in sort of a magical process that happens. And felting is really a very bizarre process. Anyway, that's a whole nother topic. To keep on the idea of fiber art. So fiber arts is can be felting. There's needle felting, which can be more forgiving, and you can use a wider range of materials, fibrous materials, with needle felting, because it doesn't require that magical process that happens with specific feltable wools, because not all wool is feltable. And then, so that does include spinning as fiber arts, meaning spinning yarn. And you can spin crazy art yarn that can then be used in weavings or the felting. Sculpturally, it can be combined with more than one material, and you can do mixed media, and you could do sculpture, you could do, I mean, there's really, so anytime you add fiber to an art process, whether it be sculpture or like you can add texture to a painting with fiber, you could, I mean, you can do jewelry with fiber, so that's considered fiber arts. So you can weave yarn into something. You can make felted things that become part of jewelry. You could felt a whole like collar necklace thing and it's jewelry. You could make hats. That's a felted art. You could crochet and knit hats. Again, fiber arts. Weaving, totally art form, whether on a giant huge loom that's partially mechanized, because there is a process to setting that patterning up with warping a loom, and if it's got multiple treadles and all the things. And I am not a complex weaver. It is so complex, it's a little beyond me most days to wrap my brain around all the processes that you can do with weaving. And then you can, so basically fabric in general. So technically speaking, sewing is a fiber art. So anything involving fabric, embroidery is technically a fiber art. And you can do a lot more with embroidery than a lot of people give it credit. You can, so sewing, sort of kind of leatherwork is within fiber arts, because you do involve fiber in the leatherwork in a way, depending, because sometimes it's a bizarre, it technically is like a crossover thing. Again, like, I mean, so wide range: knitting, spinning, crochet, felting, weaving, jewelry, wirework, leatherwork. I mean, so many different, so anyway, so a lot of those things fall into fiber arts. Like, so, you know, you see someone with a beautifully sewn and embellished jacket, if that's fiber art. So even like taking a jean jacket, and like I actually needle felted into a jean jacket, and that's fiber art. And so, I mean, there's just so many different things you can do, and it's all technically fiber art. So fiber art is not well known, but it's really in our daily lives everywhere. I mean, technically speaking, our clothes is related to fiber art. You know, the clothing we wear every day, because somehow, you know, the cotton had to be spun, in this case very much in a high volume mill, and then was processed into a woven fabric or a knit fabric, and then taken to the sewing machines and so on. So again, I mean, that's technically fiber art, but that is on a different scale. And so when we think of fiber art, we're talking about the stuff that the human really touches, that is much more involved with an inspiration process. Uh, so anyway, so like anytime of you talk about art, art is done by a person with inspiration and creativity and all the things of the human touch. Not going to get into discussion about AI art, at least not right now, because okay, yep, AI art is technically, you can make imagery with AI, but I would not call it AI art, because that technically, in my opinion, is not art. Anyway, because they had to get the ideas and the imagery to base it off of somewhere. I digress. Okay. Don't want to get into. Please don't comment about AI art if you have an opinion. I'm not going to engage. Anyway, have a good one.